I'd like you to please welcome Carole Avriett, who is a best-selling author and speaker known for her detailed military history memoirs and inspiring Christian books. She previously spent 14 years as the Holmes editor for the Southern Living magazine.
Thank you so much, and I have to just sort of begin by saying this is about one of the coolest groups I've ever spoken to, right? And I have brought with me today the gentleman that wrote the foreword for the book that we're going to be talking about, Admiral Pringle, and he is the current Navy Officers Association president nationwide. So you'll enjoy hearing from him too. And then another very special guest, and I'm going to keep that a secret until we get to him. But right first, Susan. Admiral Pringle and I just looked at each other when you were giving your presentations, because next weekend I am flying to DC and I'm accompanying my son, and the reason we're going up there is because my grandson and his church choir, and he's the president of the choir, has been asked to sing at Arlington. And that's not all. Since he's the president of the choir, and I can hardly believe this, but they have asked him to lay the wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown, my grandson. So maybe his Nana's love of military history has sort of worn off on him. So I hope so anyway. Can I wait until just a minute to let me put this down just a second. I wanted to start by saying, again, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so very much. The question that I get asked the most is, how did you get into writing military history books? And so here's the story, and I'm sticking to it. So many of my family members have been military, all right? My father was career Navy, a senior chief, and he was at Pearl, and he never said Pearl Harbor, it was always just Pearl. He was at Pearl, December 7th, 1941. I brought with me today one of my most treasured possessions. It's his album, it's over on the other table, from the South China Seas, late 30s, and there are original photographs all through it of every single ship that was in Manila Bay during that time. There's a picture of him. He was the catcher for the Asiatic Fleet baseball team, and I think some of you who are Go Navy would enjoy looking through that album, and it's my pleasure to be able to share that with you today. So there was my father. Then there was my stepdad, who joined up the day after he graduated from law school and fought in North Africa, and then in the Battle of Tunis, Tunisia, in Sicily, and then up the boot of Italy with General Mark Clark, and came out the war with field grades, promotions to lieutenant colonel. So he saw a lot of things. He never talked about the war. He only said 3 sentences my entire lifetime about World War II. Number 1, the fields were really muddy in Italy during the spring. Number 2, the other sentence, second sentence, the potatoes were so small we had to eat them skin and all. And number 3, his last sentence, I've never had friends like the friends that I had in World War II. Now, also, my father, the one that was at Pearl, had a very adventuresome brother, my Uncle Jasper. And he decided even before the war that he was going to join up with a gentleman named General Claire Lee Chenault. And he was General Chenault's chief mechanic in Burma for the Flying Tigers. So I do have a few, and I have various and sundry Marine cousins and so on and so forth. So when the family gets together, it's an all-military affair. I love interviewing people. I did that in my magazine career, and I have spent the last 15 years, I have a passion for military history, always have, so I decided, you know what? I'm going to start trying to find as many stories that are unknown and write about them, to get some of these stories out, and that is what I've done. I've been fortunate enough to have a couple of national bestsellers. And then my previous book, Studying Marine Raiders and giving their account, I was able to interview, out of the 4 Marine Raiders I wrote about, I was able to interview 3 who are still living. It was just an amazing thing. They were part of the invasions in the South Pacific, in the Solomon Islands, and it was just a pleasure and my honor to be able to tell their story. While I was doing the research on Marine Raiders, I ran across a very little known story about 4 little small destroyers that had been converted. We're going to talk about those in just a minute. They were redesignated APDs. And they carried the Marine Raiders to the Solomon Islands for the invasion, and then later on up the ladder, so to speak, of the island ladder. One particular ship came up 2 or 3 times. A little ship called the USS Gregory. And this was one of the converted ships. I'll show you a picture in a minute. But the sacrifice and the valor of these men on this little ship, so little known, and what happened to the ship and what happened to the sailors that were on that ship just fascinated me. I began to do a deep dive. I was able to find out, I was able to get records, find out in-depth stories about each of these, and that's what I've done. I have written the story of the USS Gregory, and we'll show you some of the men that I wrote about. 4 main sailors on that ship are a part of this book. So I'm going to start with the, I've got some slides here. And we're going to start with these. This is a film clip. You might recognize it from In Harm's Way. I'll just let you watch it for a minute.
Sir? Folks, if the captain were coming aboard, you wouldn't be dressed that way, would you?
I suspect not, sir.
Well, then let's crawl back in a uniform. You make us look like a bunch of pirates.
Aye, Mr. McConnell.
All right, 15-2, 15-4. Double run of 8 to 12. Your credit.
Anything interesting?
Got a run of 3. All the carriers pulled out Friday night.
Where?
Scuttlebutt says south. Lahaina Roads, maybe.
Sir, I just got the Hawaiian Sea Frontier Dispatch Dakota.
I'll give it to our captain, Lieutenant J.G. McConnell.
More fun and games? No. Destroyer Ward and the inshore patrol dropped depth charges on a submarine contact inside the defensive sea area.
Some poor Joe's really got it in the ringer now. Attacking one of our own subs.
Better commence evasive zigzag pattern, Commander. Set extra lookout.
Aye, aye, sir.
Morning, Captain.
Good morning, Commander Eddington, and how are you this fine day?
Splendid. Lancashire.
What's the alert? Well, the picket destroyer Ward dropped some depth charges on what they think is a sub about 15 miles from here, near the seaport.
And another poor whale lost his brother. Sir?
Yes?
We're just looking for subs or planes, too.
Anything, son.
Well, there's a large formation of planes orbiting north of the island, sir.
Looks like we got the pilots up early for Squadron X attack.
Strange place to rendezvous. Why aren't they over Diamond Head where they belong?
Sir, there's a formation off Diamond Head, too.
I don't like it, Paul. Town General Quarters, make it no drill.
Yes, sir.
we're going to pause there just a minute and, before I show you the next one. This, what is so fascinating to me about the In Harm's Way movie, is one of my favorites, but they used actual sailors in all of those scenes. That's why they look like they know what they're doing. So, so there's some great scenes in there with sailors, and I became interested in finding out a little bit more about this story. And so I did some research. This might be a good trivia question for someone sometime. The original novel was called Harm's Way, and it was written by a gentleman named James Bassett. And I thought, well, I wonder why Mr. Bassett was so interested in this particular story and happened to write a novel about it. So I did some research on James Bassett, who turned out to be in the Navy, and he was the public relations officer for Admiral Halsey. That's why he was interested in all of that and the Pearl Harbor incident and so on and so forth. I've got another clip that I want you to see of Pearl Harbor, and one of the reasons I guess Pearl Harbor interests me so much is really the jumping off place for so many of my books, but the fact that my father was there at the same time. This is another 2 to 3 minute film clip, but this is all original film that was shot by photographers and put together probably by the Smithsonian. But I want you to watch this. It really gives you, of course, because the video equipment was not that good, it's a little bit fuzzy, but it will give you, this is real film footage shot at Pearl Harbor.
On Sunday, December 7th, 1941, shortly before 8 a.m., Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States of America by bombing the US Naval Base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The base was attacked by 350 Imperial Japanese aircrafts. Though the raid only lasted 75 minutes, the Japanese destroyed or damaged nearly 20 American naval vessels, including 8 battleships and more than 340 airplanes. Over 2,400 Americans died in the attack, and many more were wounded. While the attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise, tensions between the US and Japan had deteriorated over the decade, in particular with regards to Japan's expansion into China. The plan for attacking Pearl Harbor was to destroy the US's Pacific Fleet, a move which would give the Japanese time to carry out its plans to keep control of the Pacific without US interference. The shock of the attack without declaration of war enraged the American public and rallied the nation to get behind a war many hoped to avoid. At the beginning of his speech to Congress requesting a declaration of war, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered this now famous line.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
On December 8, 1941, one day after the attack, the United States Congress declared war on Japan, officially entering World War II.
All right, so basically, both Navy, Army, across the board, Marines, the United States was essentially caught flat-footed. And all branches of service rushed to prepare war. And one of the things that the Navy did, they realized that they would need to have more ships. And so in order to fill in the gap of this need, they went to mothball World War I destroyers that had been mothballed for over 20 years, over 2 decades anyway. And these were 4 stacks, and they were called flush deckers because the deck was absolutely flat. It had no protrusions other than what you imagine, the cannon and so on and so forth, but they were flush. And they took 36 of these World War I destroyers that had been in mothballs for so long, got them out, converted them because they knew that they would need additional transports to take Marines, take soldiers, whoever, long distances. And this is the USS Gregory before conversion, okay? You'll see that it's got the 4 smokestacks, had 4 boilers, and the crew on these particular ships were about 120, something like that, okay? And the amount of men that would have to be added to that would more than double that number, because they would go in and probably add another 120, 130 Marines or soldiers or whoever they needed to carry. And so here is what then the USS Gregory looked like after conversion, and this is an actual photograph of the Gregory in Guadalcanal. They were a part of the very first invasion, which took place on August 7th, 1942, 8 months to the day after the bombing of Pearl. And they carried the Marines, the Gregory, and 3 other of these little transports, took Edson's raiders to the Solomon Islands to invade Tulagi, and then after they captured Tulagi, then they went over and helped the others that were fighting on Guadalcanal itself. So the ship, and by the way, you see the men that are in the corner there, that is the sister ship of the Gregory, the Little, okay? It's such an interesting thing as I got to researching this. The several people even called it like a marriage, a very, very close-knit group. The sailors on these little transports, and by the way, the Marines nicknamed them the Green Dragons because they were painted with camouflage. But when you take out 2 stacks and 2 boilers, they were tentatively called, in quotes, high-speed, no, not high-speed transport. And they had to remove almost all of their weaponry. And so these little ships were basically defenseless. And the Marine raiders became so respectful of these crews because they knew that they were going into a very dangerous situation in the Solomon Islands and defenseless as well. They became really, really close. It's just an interesting thing. They respected each other. They took care of each other. It was just an incredible bonding that took place between the Marine raiders and especially Edson's raiders and the sailors that were on the ship. So I started researching to see who was the commander of the Gregory, and it turned out that it was a gentleman named Harry Bauer, whose father was a sergeant major in the cavalry. And he had traveled all over the world living with his sergeant major father. Harry himself was born on an army post in Georgia, was raised in Chattanooga. He was sort of like the man about campus. He was editor-in-chief of his high school yearbook. He was a cheerleader. He was the lead in every school play. He was most handsome. He was most popular in school. And he decided when he completed his schooling, which was at Annapolis, that he would, of course, stay in as a career and became the commander of the USS Gregory. Found out on January 1st, which was also his little daughter's 5th birthday. All right, so we have Harry Bauer. And we have another sailor on this ship named Charles Jackson French. One of the most interesting stories that I have ever come across. French was the son of a sharecropper in the bottomlands of Arkansas. And as you know, at that particular time, there were not very many places for really any children to learn to swim, but particularly for a black child. And so Charles Jackson French decided that he wanted to learn to swim, and the place that he learned to swim happened to be in the Red River. And some of you may remember the Red River again from a John Wayne movie. That is one of the most iconic rivers in our country. It runs about 1,200 miles. It forms the border of Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and it is one heck of a river. I cleaned that up a little bit. You'll read it in the book. It is so dangerous. It has such incredibly strong currents. And if you touch the bottom, people say it feels like quicksand. It's not really quicksand, but it feels that way because the currents are so strong and they suck you down. The mayor of Foreman, Arkansas, which is the area that Charles was born in, the bottomlands around Foreman, told me that we have people drowning this thing all the time. We never find their bodies. But some way, somehow, Charles, as a young boy, learned to swim, and that's the only place he could have learned to swim, which means that he was an extremely strong swimmer by the time he got to be on up as a teenager. He goes off, he joins the Navy when he's just shy of 18 years old in 1937, and stayed in for about 4 years. Came out, 10 days later was Pearl Harbor. And he turned right around, went right back down to the official place to enlist. He was living with his sister in Omaha, Nebraska at the time. Enlisted and wound up on the USS Gregory in the South Pacific. Here is another sailor that was on the Gregory. His name was Ensign Robert Adrian. He was from Oregon. His father was a sheep herder, and some way or another Bob was able to get an appointment to the Academy, Naval Academy, and he was of the class of 1943. There's only been one class in the history of the Naval Academy that has graduated in 3 years, and that was the class. And the reason was they had to get those boys out and assigned to ships out at sea. And Bob was one of those. He remained in the Navy as a career, okay, and was part of the 4 people that were on the bridge with the captain the night that it was shelled. Now this next person is boatswain mate Oswald Austin, all right? And I, in researching, found out that he had a most interesting story. Oswald was also on the bridge the night that the Gregory was shelled, which was the night of September 5th and 6th. They had just put off the remaining Marine raiders, taking them from Tulagi across to Guadalcanal at night, and the Japanese spotted them. A PBY, one of ours, accidentally dropped flares thinking it was a submarine, and lit up the Gregory and also her sister ship, the Little, and they were under complete, total shelling from the Japanese. The Gregory rolled over and began to go down. The men that were on the bridge with Harry Bauer, the bridge exploded and they fell 15, 18, 20 feet. This particular boatswain's mate, Oswald Austin, had been in the Coast Guard in North Carolina. And at that time, the Navy looked for anybody to fold in. And they folded in everybody in the Coast Guard, as many as they could, into the Navy. And this was such an interesting story because after Oswald fell those 18, 20 feet, he spent years with having the organs inside his body. When they never operated on him. He was rescued, but he couldn't remember who he was for about 6 months. And all of his organs had started growing together. It wasn't until 1960 that he found a surgeon that would work with him. He suffered so badly from PTSD, found a surgeon who would work with him. They opened him up and realized that all the organs had grown like together, and part of his stomach, even part of his rib cage. And I learned of this story, this brave sailor who, the only thing that was on him when they found him, no ID, no nothing, were a couple of Japanese coins. And you'll have to read the book to find out how he got those. But the way I learned mostly about Oswald Alston is by interviewing his son, hours on the telephone, to find out about his dad. And we have never met face to face until today. And he lives, when I found out he had moved from North Carolina to the Villages, I called, I said, you must come, I'm going to be doing a presentation. And he did, and Don, I'd like for you to stand up. Would you kind of help him stand up here? Now, I want to just tell you, okay, that experience of his dad didn't shy him away. He retired as an EA, Special Chief Petty Officer, Senior Chief Petty Officer from the Navy. His grandfather was also Coast Guard, correct?
One was Coast Guard, the other was Navy.
And the other Navy. And the grandfather was the Caratuck Lighthouse tender, but that was also, finally, the Lighthouse group was also then eventually pulled into the Coast Guard, and his son just retired as a captain in the Navy. We are talking 5 generations, Coast Guard Navy. Thank you so much, Don.
Can you turn around so you take a picture?
Oh, yes, oh. Turn around so you can take a picture, okay? I'm going to just go through, because we're running out of time, I want to just quickly show you just a little bit of the next. This is just a map showing where on August 7th the invasion force landed. You had Edson's group going up to Tulagi. By the way, the reason they used the raiders for Tulagi and not Guadalcanal, Tulagi is where the Japanese had their special forces lodged. And so they knew that they needed to have some really other special forces going to that. I want to show you just a little bit more. This is today, Sea Lark Channel, and it was soon to be renamed Ironbottom Sound. And if you want to know why, Ironbottom Sound, roughly 70 ships went down in that channel. Ours, theirs, 70 ships. Battleships, 2 carriers, destroyers, cruisers, aircraft. 1,300 to 1,400 aircraft. Around 600 US planes, 683 Japanese planes. All right? You can begin to understand, that's not counting the materiel. We're talking tanks, cannon, ammo, everything that you can possibly imagine. The sailors had already started renaming Sea Lark Channel Ironbottom Sound. It now represents the most sought after dive site by pros now in the world. And they've only begun to mark, they have 20 sites marked that you can dive to, but most of it is so deep, very hard to even find. And we're not entirely certain where the Gregory is. But a little thing that I ran into in researching this, Bob Adrian, the ensign that I showed you at the beginning, one of the 4 characters, he sketched where the Gregory and the Little went down. So I've got a pencil sketch of that in the book that the family had. And there they are. Harry Bauer, Charles Jackson French, and I'll let Admiral Pringle tell you what has happened recently that is so exciting about that. French saved 15 sailors that night. He was not injured because he was down in the galley. He came out, and guess what he could do? He could swim like a fish. And he jumped in the water. He pulled 15 wounded sailors out, got them into a raft. I have his own words saying how the sharks would rub against his feet. That Guadalcanal was shark infested. Just had so many sharks in it. And he swam all night, keeping them away from shore and away from drifting out to sea. That gives you the red dots where a ship went down. That gives you some idea of what the bottom of Ironbottom Sound looks like today. And right there is where we think the Gregory and the Little are located. So we're hoping to find those one day. I'm going to turn this now over to Admiral Pringle, but I just want you to know it was providential that I was able to get him to write the foreword for me. One of the best forewords I've ever had written. During his distinguished career, he has led joint, combined multinational and international organizations. He's retired after 34 and a half years. He commanded the Navy's first hybrid propulsion drive ship, the USS Macon Island, which happens to be exactly Carlson's Raiders, where they took over. Again, so coincidental here. He has served as the director of the Navy's Senate Liaison Office. He also commanded the USS Whidbey Island, which was the Hurricane Katrina disaster relief ship. And he is the 25th president of the National Naval Officers Association. And it's going to be his delight to tell you a little something about what is going on with Charles Jackson French right now. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. So every single time that we do this presentation, I believe this is probably the 5th or 6th time, every time I hear general quarters, I get triggered. Because those of you who have been on ships before know that we are all cut from the same mold. We understand exactly where our training kind of leads us. It takes us towards that worst day, that worst hour, to be prepared to respond to it. So showing that clip from In Harm's Way just really kind of gets me in that seagoing mood. And I was talking with Senior Chief Austin here, and it did the exact same for him. And for anyone else who's served in the sea services, you know exactly what I mean. But what I would love to do today, and I know we're a little bit pressed for time, I want to talk about this from 3 different perspectives. When we go on board ships, we have an indoctrination, and we usually tell people there are 3 priorities on the ship. The first priority is the ship, because that's your lifeblood. Everybody lives on their own police department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you become a close-knit team. The second piece is your shipmate. So ship and shipmate. Take care of your shipmates. Everybody has a job. There's 0 unemployment on a ship. Everybody has a job. And that's a great part about it. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about self, shipmate self. And from a self perspective as it relates to this story, believe it or not, I actually identify much better with Harry Bauer as a former commanding officer of the ship. Because as a commanding officer, you're responsible for every single life on board that ship. Whether they're ship's company, United States Marine Corps, United States Army, civilians, whoever the case may be, you're responsible for their livelihood. You're responsible for protecting them, training them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I also identify with, and I used to call him Petty Officer French, but Carole educated me because she is a historian. The Petty Officer rank wasn't applied to the mess attendants until later. So mess attendant French and I have a lot in common, except the swimming part. We'll talk about that as well, but he and I have a lot in common, and it's just great that Carole had the courage to actually put this story together and tell this this powerful story. And it's going in the right direction right now, and I probably shouldn't bear the lead on this, but 2 things have happened recently. In 2024, the then Secretary of the Navy, Secretary Del Toro, named a U.S. destroyer after Petty Officer French. And that is awesome. I mean, to have a ship named after you, that was just that's just a really powerful thing. The reason that that happened was because after Mess Attendant French saved 15 of his shipmates, after he swam for 8 hours in shark-infested waters, he actually got back to land and was nominated for the Navy Cross for life-saving. Our country and our Navy wasn't mature enough to award him what he'd earned, so they gave him a letter of commendation. And to me, that was just a disappointment of the time, but fortunately, Secretary Del Toro made it right by naming a ship after him. The Navy's also named swimming pools and things along those lines after him, just to recognize that level of heroism that he demonstrated. And to me, it's just such an impressive thing. And I'll say the last piece, and remind me to talk about this if I forget. There is one more thing that's really going to get this story, I believe, on the map. But, as promised, let's talk a little bit about the USS Gregory. So the USS Gregory was modified to do the mission it was asked to do. At the time, it was a destroyer, decommissioned destroyer. They brought it out, ripped out 2 of the engines, 2 of the boilers, and actually created room for the Marines to be embarked aboard. That was actually one of the forefathers for the ships that I commanded, USS Whidbey Island as well as USS Macon Island, because those ships were designed to actually embark Marines. So obviously we got better at how we were doing that, and those ships were literally designed to do that. And Carole talked a little bit about the USS Macon Island. The coolest part about that, I'm a little bit of a STEM nerd, and I've always been a bit of a STEM nerd, and you kind of have to be, depending on your line of work. But back when I was getting my first master's degree, I literally wrote on the thesis of the smart ship concept, using more automation to actually reduce the manpower. Manpower costs money, et cetera, et cetera. So we talked about automation, we talked about how do we actually make these ships more efficient and use less people. And some of the systems that we talked about ended up being on USS Macon Island years later when I got in a position to command at the 06 level. And it was just the coolest thing to actually be in command of that ship with a hybrid propulsion system, saving taxpayer dollars in the process. But the part that I won't talk about, and I know Harry Bob wouldn't talk about this either, is there are also gremlins associated with that new and unproven technology. So there were some times when, yes, when we're heading into troubled waters, that the lights would go out. And we had to literally figure it out. And that was just part of sea duty, being out there by yourself without the benefits. And I know Don here was a tech rep. And technical representation sometimes help you figure out things. But when you're out there and you look 360 degrees and all you see is water, you got to figure it out yourself. And so the cool part about that ship was we worked through all of that. And now the Navy actually has several ships with that same kind of hybrid propulsion technology. For the low speeds, the same energy that keeps the lights on actually turns the motors, electric motors. For high speed, we had 2 gas turbine engines with about 75,000 horsepower. So it was actually pretty cool. So please forgive me if I tend to smile a lot when I talk about my time on that ship, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. So from a ship perspective, we built on the lessons that were learned from the USS Gregory. Secondly, from a shipmate standpoint, we had 1,000 sailors on board. 1,000 sailors, 2,000 Marines, and any assortment of other communities that were represented at any given time. But again, we had to live together. We had to get to the point where we also worked together and supported one another. And it was literally a floating piece of America. As you see what's going on today, a United States Navy ship is the only piece of America that can get up and go anywhere. And when we go into the waters of any nation, you pick a nation, they understand what American diplomacy is all about. And also, believe it or not, there are also people who want to come from whatever country we're off the coast of. They want to get on board our ships, simply because they know that is American territory. So really, really just a good, to me it was fun actually having multi-generational, multiracial, multi-gender crew getting together and understanding that everybody has a job, everybody's expected to do their job, and they're held to that standard. And if you don't understand either the language or the equipment, then ask somebody. We're here as a team, we're here to get better, we're here to continuously improve as a team, and we were able to do that. And then lastly, from a self perspective, Harry Bauer was he had a worse day as a commanding officer. No commanding officer ever wants his or her ship to be attacked. And Lord knows you never want to lose any sailors. And so that was an unfortunate incident, but we're all trained to respond to that, do our own damage control, fix the systems that we can fix. And believe it or not, we actually do what we call we do man overboard drills as well, but we do abandoned ship drills. When you've taken a missile, you've taken a torpedo, we train people on how to abandon ship. In that case, it happened so fast that they just responded. Again, went to general quarters, people either fell off or got blown off or whatever the case may be. But Harry Bauer, instead of him saving his own life, he actually did what most commanding officers do, most true leaders do. He actually redirected his mess attendant to go save the lives of others. And to me, that's the ultimate sacrifice. And that's exactly how most folks who actually are commanding ships at sea, that's how they lead, that's how they live. And lastly, with Mess Attendant French, and I'm still trying to keep calling him Petty Officer French, but with Mess Attendant French, to show up in our Navy in that time and to only be limited to being a mess attendant and not be given the opportunity to do other things was just the mindset of our nation during that time period. But he knew his capabilities, and there's actually a caption in the book that Carole talks about where some of his crew members, and they were actually a closely knit crew, but they would always joke with him saying, "No, you don't know how to swim. You know, you're a black kid from Arkansas, you don't know how to swim." But when the time came, he was the absolute only person on that ship that could have done that, could have saved 15 lives. And to me, I stand on their shoulders. I think by people like him showing that you're not limited based on where you came from, what you look like, you're only limited by the ceilings that are put in place. And to me, for him to actually do that is one of the reasons why I'm able to stand here before you as a guest speaker today. So thank you all for having me. And I will say, thank you. I will say, I know we've got about 5 minutes left and we've got to get out of here. After my tour on USS Macon Island, I did 2 years on Capitol Hill, but that's another 2-hour conversation if you want to talk about that. But I know for a fact that Carole always likes taking questions, so if you all have any questions either for me or for Carole or for Don Austin, now's the time to do it.
Well, we do have one more little fun thing about the book. We're both excited about it, but I have signed a movie option for it. What you need to do is say a prayer that the director-producer can find investors, because there's so much going on in the world today, it's kind of tough to do that. I do have books over here if you'd like to purchase one. They're $15, or you can order one of my books from Amazon. Wanted to get that in too, so yeah.
What is the name of the book?
Midnight in Ironbottom Sound. The book is Midnight in Ironbottom Sound. Avriett, A-V-I-R-E-T-T. Got that right, didn't I?
Can they posthumously award him the Navy Cross?
Let me
Yes.
answer that.
Go ahead.
There is a representative from Nebraska, Don Bacon. Some of you may know who he was, national. He is working to get him posthumously a Medal of Honor. Wow. So the wheels turn slowly, but who knows? It'll be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Carole, this is for you. Thank you.
Do I open it now?
It's up to you. Admiral Pringle, thank you for being here.
Oh, look at this, how beautiful.
Senior Chief Austin, thank you for being here as well.